Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Gay with God podcast, a safe place for us to share our stories and support one another. How long did we know? What challenges did we face? Did we lose our faith? When did we find our way back home? Or are we still searching? The stories you hear on this podcast will melt your heart and strengthen your belief that in God, all things are possible, and you can be authentically gay with the God of your understanding. I am your host, Midge Noble, and I am very honored that you are here. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Gay with God podcast. So glad that you're joining us again this week. And I have a really cool guest for you. I'm going to let him introduce himself, but his name is Christian Rutherford. And Christian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, so my name's Christian, and I live in Wilmington, North Carolina, same place where one of your previous guests lives, and is actually how we got connected with Cody Allage, and got to listen to his episodes and got introduced to your podcast in that way. But I am a youth pastor here at a local Methodist church. I attended Liberty University for my undergrad and my graduate work. I've been working in church ministry for about 12 years now, and just kind of continuing to do that process and go where God leads me in that way.
Well, see, there's already interesting things that you're telling me. One,
Yes,
you're a Methodist.
yes, this is going to be a story.
This is a story. So let's just get started with that. Tell us a little bit about, for you, just in the beginning, the Methodist Church and all that you guys are enduring right now.
Sure.
How are you dealing with that? And because I already know you're an advocate for the LGBTQIA plus community, so I'm interested to know how did this evolve for you? You know, your journey of learning about homosexuality, what you believed in the past, and what's going on with the church now. Take us on a little journey about how you've gotten into this work and how you had it all come together in your head.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's really like my entire life story, which
Okay.
I think it's almost like I don't want to take credit for it like this way at all. It's almost like a coming out story like that you give for like other people, but it's like for me, it's my my understanding and my acceptance and my affirmation of the LGBTQ plus community. I grew up in a Methodist church, and did that up until I was in ninth grade. Was very involved in the church and everything like that, and then saw the ugly side of church and the politics and everything like that. And my youth pastor was let go from our church, and it was literally just church politics stuff, nothing shady, nothing weird, just stupid stuff. And so then I walked away from church for a while, and basically all through high school I was your like normal party high school kid, doing that thing. And then when my senior year came around and you're getting all your college acceptance letters and things like that, I was getting the college rejection letters. And it really didn't make any sense. Like I had the grades, the SAT scores, all that kind of stuff that I needed to get into the schools that I wanted to get into. But this was really where God was kind of beginning to intervene in my life and begin kind of pulling me and pushing me into my call, because my mom was sitting on the couch with me in January of my senior year, and I was sitting there like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And she was like, well, do you remember when you were in middle school and you used to say you want to be a youth pastor? I was like, yeah, but I'm disqualified from that now. That's not that's not going to be a good look for me anymore. Not going to be something I can do. Also, just really wasn't interested in it at that point either. But that's when kind of the nagging began to start. And long story short, I end up that fall at dropping my bags off and showing up at Liberty University, which, you know, is a notoriously conservative evangelical institution, and definitely not one that is very affirming at all. So I did my undergrad there, got my undergrad in religion with a focus in youth ministry. And then I married my wife the month after I graduated in May. And then I started into my grad work, and got my seminary degree from Liberty as well. And it's kind of, there's where the story kind of starts to begin with me becoming affirming. I've always been somebody who is truly a love everybody kind of person, but I still would have called homosexuality a sin. But I was saying, okay, it's a sin, but it's no different than the sin of divorce or the sin of pornography or the sin of idolatry or anything. Like, it's all sin, right? And that was kind of the thing that I held on to. But what started for me was I had an assignment where I had to read a book that was completely non-affirming to the LGBTQ community. And it was an assignment in one of my seminary classes to read it and then write a report on it. So I read the book, I wrote the report, and I took a more affirming stance. I still wasn't fully affirming at that time, but I definitely took a complete opposite stance of like what my professor would have expected me to write. Now, somehow, I guess by God's grace or maybe their own secret affirmation, I still got an A on the paper because they were like, it was really well written. I have some comments. I don't really agree with where you land on this, but it's clear that you do understand like the exegesis of the scripture, and you pulled out and made some really, really good points. And so I was like, okay, cool. But it really, like, still for me, I was still just kind of like hemming and hawing on the line of, I don't really want to say, like, I'm still like, it's a sin. I'm still holding that, but they deserve God's love and grace just like the rest of us. So within this time period, I'm working for a couple different Baptist churches along the way. Yeah.
Well, buddy, you've been on the dark side for a while.
Yeah, no, let's see, it was, gosh, what year was that? 2011 or 2012 is where I took my first youth pastor position at a small Baptist church out in the middle of nowhere, Virginia, that literally had no stoplight in the entire county.
Wow.
All right. And I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh,
so
okay.
like that was a big switch for me. But through that, actually, that first church is where I met my first trans student. And he at the time was asking me about, he was like, I think I'm gay. And I look back and I just like cringe at like what I like went and told him and everything like that at that time. I was like, like, you're deserving of God's love and everything like that, but it is a sin, and like you should try to abstain from it, and like it'll go away and all this kind of stuff. But he has now transitioned and she is doing wonderful, and we actually have conversations now, and she actually looks back and goes, I knew that you had the best intentions back then. Like, I still actually felt loved by you. Like, you didn't come across as like overly harsh. I didn't really like your conclusion by any means, but I knew that you meant it from like a genuine place of love and not one of judgment and hate. But now, we're on the flip side of things, and
Good.
we're on to that. So fast forwarding a little bit, my wife and I moved to Wilmington, North Carolina in 2017. It's really when kind of my deconstruction process began, where I was deconstructing some of the things that had been ingrained in me and taught to me and all this kind of stuff. And these were things that I think in the back of my mind, I was always kind of wondering and questioning a little bit, and, not really 100% sure on, but I felt like, no, I need to say these things, right? Like, this is, I'm working to be a pastor. This is what is expected of me and what I'm supposed to say. Right.
Right.
But I was working originally in a Baptist church here in town, and it was just through that process, working there and getting out of the bubble that I was in Lynchburg. You're in this like Christian bubble. Everybody kind of thinks the same, believes the same. Like, there's really no challenging of that. And then when we moved here into town, a family member of ours that we had kind of lost contact with over the years, she was beginning her coming out story, and she had already kind of distanced herself from us because I'm the pastor of the family, and she went ahead and made her assumptions as to how I would feel about her. But once we moved here where she was living, we reconnected with her, and about a month after us moving here, she actually moved into our home because she had a bad roommate situation. And so that was the first time that I was really challenged head on and had to look at somebody in their face and tell them, like, I really don't agree with your lifestyle. Like she was like, you're a pastor. Like, what do you think about me? And I was like, well, I love you, but, and we all love that line, right? The I love
We
you, but yes.
I love the sinner, not the sin.
Yes. Yeah. See, exactly. You understand. We
I've
can just
heard
stop the
it.
conversation there, right? Like that just writes all Christians off for, we're good. As long as you can say that you love the sinner and you hate the sin, you're totally fine. Yeah. No. Uh, um, but I finally was able to sit down and have those tough conversations that, I'm the white male pastor, my privilege is seeping. And so being able to actually sit down with somebody who was living it and going through it, and then to come to find out that, she had actually come out in high school, she had come out to her church, and then she was kicked out of her church, and her sitting there telling me like, I spent so much time like praying that I could be straight, and that like I don't want to be like this, and just like having her say those things to me with tears in her eyes, and I kind of started to go, okay, well, maybe it's not a choice. And this is what made me, really dive into scripture, because that's my training. Being at Liberty, I was taught, go to the Bible, and rip it apart and figure out every little detail. And I will say, like, I mean, I was trained well, at Liberty on how to study scripture and go in and look at not just what's there in the black and white, which is what your average Joe American Christian is doing, is looking at what they see in that
Literal.
English text that has been, translated already. But, I was taught to go back and look at the Greek and the Hebrew, and to go back and look at the historical context, what was going on in history at that time. And not only that, but even like looking at the cultural context, like what was going on in the culture and the people of that day. And it was at that time that I also decided to stop just listening and reading very conservative people, people that fit my brand of Christianity. I was like, you know what? There are people out there who believe some crazy things, and I'm going to start listening to them and reading them so I can understand why they believe these things, because, clearly the devil's got a hold of them and they're leading people astray, and I want to know why. It was through that. It was through really studying the scripture, beginning to listen to some different thoughts on the process, and then actually beginning to engage with the LGBTQ community, because we would also go out on Friday nights, me and my wife and her, and we'd go downtown, and we would always somehow end up at some point at the gay club and the midnight drag show. And then so here's Christian, the youth pastor of the Baptist church, in the middle of the drag show. And when you're out and you're socializing with people, it always comes up, so what do you do for work? And I'm not hiding behind it. I'm like, oh, I'm actually the youth pastor over at such and such church. And at this point, like you said, I love everybody, and grace and Jesus and all that is for everyone. And I really was never like a you need to totally change your ways type of person, but I still kind of felt in my heart of hearts that I think a little bit of like, okay, that's probably necessary, but I don't have to have that challenging conversation because the Holy Spirit's going to come and do that for them, right? But it was actually the Holy Spirit that was working in me and showing me what this really looked like and what this really meant. And everything kind of started coming to a head for me right as 2019 turned into 2020. I think by January of 2020, I had in my mind made up my mind that yes, I am affirming. I wasn't ready to come out and say it yet because I knew that was going to be dangerous for me with my job. And I knew that I needed that check, unfortunately, for my family to continue to make ends meet. But I began to have conversations with those closest around me about it. And finding other people who also shared that ideology. And then, COVID happened, and that was a fun time for the world.
Oh, yeah.
And then the events around George Floyd happened, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and all of that kind of stuff. All the riots and everything. And it was during that time period that I was like, you know what? I'm not ready to post outwardly on my social media platforms about being gay affirming, but I can definitely stand up for racism and that be safe, right?
That's right.
So I thought.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. Because I feel like we should be at that point in American history where we're okay, with understanding that. But as we all know, we're not.
We're not.
But yeah, so I started, sharing some things about just not being racist. I'm not taking any type of political side here. I have to be the pastor and be very careful about playing politics. Although, not all of the pastors in the world are very good at that. That's are very clear on their politics. But I try to steer clear of politics because I really try to reach people on all sides of the spectrum. We're all different. We all have different beliefs and how we handle things. But if we can get back to that basis of just believing in the main thing and focusing on this guy, Jesus.
Yes.
No matter where we are on that spectrum, I think that's the direction we need to start first, right? So that's always been my goal. But I was posting on my Facebook and stuff some things about, like, hey, let's not be racist. And then in fact, I never even said Black Lives Matter because I knew that had like a political tie to it for some people. But then I shared an article from the president of the Southern Baptist Convention where he said Southern Baptists should be saying Black Lives Matter because of our negative history with the Black community. If you know anything about how the Southern Baptist Church was started, and our history and their history with the Black community, then that was a huge thing. So I shared that and I was like, I love seeing this. And then I saw something else where I believe it was the Southern Baptist Convention I am blanking on the state. It's Alabama or Louisiana, one that still has the Confederate flag in their state flag. And the Southern Baptist churches in that area were actually advocating for the removal of that. And so I shared that. And I was like, this is super cool. And then I shared a little story that really, like, all of that irked some people in my congregation. And I was like, oh, so you guys are racists. Cool. But they like went and told on me to the pastor and were like, hey, Christian's like obviously this like terrible liberal who's coming in and like trying to ruin our church and ruin our children. So we need to get rid of him. But it was when I posted this one thing that said American Christians suffer from Disney princess theology. They like to see themselves as Israel and not Egypt. They like to see themselves as Jesus and not the Pharisees and Rome. They like to be the good person, but they need to admit the times where they've been Egypt, where they've been where the American church has been the oppressor. And that really ticked some people off. And that's what got me called into my senior pastor's office. And they were, it was him and a couple deacons. And I knew how that conversation was going. I knew this was probably going to be the end of my job. But they started off focusing on the race side of things. And I convinced them. I got them to a point. I was like, look, I'm not taking a political stance here. I'm just saying you shouldn't be racist. We can all agree that that's not biblical, right? And they're like, yeah. And so I like basically had everybody in the room convinced, like, okay, hey, Christian's good. She's not doing anything sketchy here. And then the senior pastor was like, and that family member of ours, who was a lesbian, who was still living with us. And he was like, well, you have had this person living with you, and that has been a problem. And I was like, wow, way to wait 3 years to bring that up. I mean, I've brought this person to church. Gosh. They've been involved in our church and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, well, it hasn't been a problem, but now she's dating somebody and you've allowed that person she's dating to come to the house and spend the night. And I'm like, yeah, she's a roommate on the lease. It's her house as much as it is mine, whole thing. But they were like, basically I'm negatively influencing our students because by me allowing her and her girlfriend to be at my house, I am showing that I'm affirming. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, you know what? I am. And I think it's okay. And of course, that is what cost me my job. And that was right in the middle of the summer of 2020. And in the middle of the pandemic when nobody's hiring. And I'm just going, what in the world am I going to do? But the church that I'm currently working at is a Methodist church, and it's 2 streets down from my house. And the crazy thing is how God just kind of aligned all of this up. 3 weeks prior to me getting let go of my previous church, one of my neighbors walked up the road and she asked me, she said, "Hey, do you know of anybody who does youth ministry who's looking for a job? Because my church is looking for a new youth pastor." And at the time, I didn't know anybody, and I certainly didn't think I was going to be the one looking for the job. But 2 days after I had gotten let go, I was on the phone with my old youth pastor from that Methodist church who got fired that I told you about at the beginning. And I just like had this recollection. That's the word. Yeah. That I'd had this conversation 3 weeks earlier with this lady down the road. And I was like, "Hey man, I just remembered this." And he was like, "Okay, so quick pause. When you apply for this job, which I think you should, because I think you would fit in the Methodist church a lot better, you need to put on your cover letter that you are not as conservative as your previous work and education history might let on." And I was like, "Okay." And then he wrote me this wonderful letter of recommendation. And then literally the next day I was on the phone with the senior pastor of this church. And 27 days went by where I was without a job in the middle of the pandemic. And I didn't even miss a paycheck, which was just God just working throughout that entire thing. And it just began to affirm for me my affirmation of, the LGBTQ community. Because I mean, if I'm honest, like even in the midst of like finally like saying that out loud, and wondering about my employment and stuff like that, I began to go, oh my gosh, I'm not ever going to be able to find a church that's going to hire me again. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm listening to the world or something like that. But it's just been so clear every step of my path in ministry, even through all of the ups and downs and the falls and everything like that, that God's just stepped along the way and shown me and led me and guided me. And so my friends who are very conservative on this issue, they hate it and it makes their skin crawl when I say this, but I confidently say that the Holy Spirit is who led me to be an affirming pastor, because I fought for a while to be one. Like I was like, no, I don't want to do that, because I know what that means. I could have a lot more success in not being affirming in the American church, and that really wasn't even totally what it was about, maybe a little bit, but like it was just that fear of not being accepted,
of course,
by other Christians.
Of course.
And so, I certainly have no idea what it's like to be an LGBTQ person and go through that type of oppression and things like that. But I can sympathize with that, like fear of like coming out and admitting who you are and what you believe. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's been kind of the gist of like I know that was a lot, but kind of the short version, I will, of that, because I could get all into the scripture aspects and all of that of like, where God has led me and shown me and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I do have a question going back a little bit when you were talking about that it was time for you to dig into the scriptures and look at the Greek and so here's my big question about that. Not just you, but
Sure.
I got a BA and I'm supposed to have a BA in theology, but I learned from my spiritual director that really it was a BA in bad doctrine. So, so it's not really like I can use it. But anyway, it's fine. There's a purpose in everything. But in my college growing up, I remember that we took courses on defending the faith, but basically she's right. I was how to defend this doctrine. We've all read this literally and we believe it as it's written and it's inspired by God. So I don't know if the pastors, because I didn't get to be in the pastor side because I was a woman, and we can't do such a thing back then. So I don't know if they studied exegesis. I don't know if they learned all of these tricks about Greek and Hebrew. I knew some of the kids did take Greek, but if that's available and Liberty University taught you so well how to do it, why didn't they figure this out? Is it because they just weren't looking for another answer other than you're going to hell? Because if they had that skill, why are the churches continuing to just spit out and swallow the same doctrine without really taking a deep look? Why do you think that is?
Because I think a lot of, I mean, you go, it's not even just our modern church. You go back into looking at what like I'm doing a study through Acts right now with our senior adults at our church, and so we were actually talking about this morning of where like the chief high priests were trying to like stop the movement of the gospel and saying like, hey, don't invoke the name of Jesus and things like that, and and the reason is they were afraid of losing their power and their control. And I think that is the same thing that we're facing today. I I am set to believe that a lot of those who are actually well educated out there, that even that many of them probably don't even believe half the things that they're saying. But they make money doing it. Unfortunately, the church in America makes money doing certain things. Not in every case, there, and money's necessary to do ministry and to reach people and do all that type of stuff. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are definitely those out there who abuse it. And then there's just that whole thing of just, it's the tradition. Like this is how it's been and this is what we believe and we just hold to this. And I wasn't taught at Liberty that homosexuality was okay. I was taught the opposite, and I was given an argument as to why it says homosexual right there in like 1 Corinthians 6:9 or something like that. And it took my own studying, not just me myself, well, I mean, yes, on my own, but also listening to other scholars and things like that as well who have dissected these passages and looked into these things, and getting out of my bubble. And that's the thing, is I think we all kind of get in our little bubbles. We get in our little pockets of what we believe. And we never want to waver outside of those because we're comfortable right here, and getting outside of that is uncomfortable. And we don't want to be uncomfortable. We invented air conditioning for a reason.
Yeah. And my other thought about that, I agree with you that we're not getting out of our bubble because it's comfortable and growing is hard, but it's also fear of aligning with the center. So once you're in that bubble and you think, oh, so if they're sinning and I'm staying in this bubble because it's comfortable and it's tradition, if I get out of that bubble and I go ahead and agree with something, if I'm sinning with them, then I can go to the lake of fire. I think that's part of why nobody just questions. They're so afraid to leave a doctrine that they grew up in, because when you're taught that as a child, it's so immersed in you, and that's those developmental ages where you believe it, and it's hard to break through those developmental lessons because they're powerful.
No, I think a lot of like my initial thoughts on the LGBTQ community came a lot from, just the stigma of like culture, like, when I was a kid, being called gay was an insult, and so it was like this taboo thing that you didn't want to be. And so then when I like went to a conservative college that was kind of saying like, yeah, no, that is a sin, I was like, okay, well, I mean, that makes sense because, we've always thought it was weird and called, and uses an insult and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I think that you're definitely correct on that. It is a fear thing as well. Because that was part of my journey as well, is being afraid to really come out and say it and know, what that meant. And it's been a journey since then. I mean, it was 2020 when I really kind of, started doing it. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to be an advocate. And I've lost a lot of friends because of it. I had started a church with a group of friends, and we had started it with this idea of it being truly non-denominational, and the fact that like a lot of us came from a bunch of different types of denominations, and we invited different people to speak every week, and it was this really beautiful thing for like the first year and a half, where we just focused on the gospel. We all understood that we all had some different little beliefs here and there. They knew that I was affirming from the beginning, and they didn't agree. Most of them didn't agree with me, but they were like, that's not what we're here for. Excuse me. We're here for the gospel. And it was awesome. But ultimately they pushed me out because of being affirming. And that happened just about a year ago to the date. It was last August that happened. And And so I've seen, what that means. And I've lost, like I said, I've lost friendships over it.
Mm-hmm.
People who I had considered, to be some of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And, they just could not get over the fact that this is what I believed. And especially since I'm a pastor, I've been called a heretic. I've been told, and now I just kind of wear that badge proudly, like, yep, just your local heretic over here. I've been called a false teacher.
Oh, wow.
I've been told that I'm leading people astray and
Mm-hmm.
that I'm actually causing more damage to the LGBTQ community because I'm affirming their sinful ways and actually assisting them on their way to hell instead of, guiding them out of it like I should be, like a good pastor would.
Mm-hmm.
And as hard as it has been to hear that from time to time, now it's just kind of funny to me because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like if that were true, the Holy Spirit would be really racking me in a whole different way,
Mm-hmm.
and that God wouldn't have been aligning these things to kind of affirm this path in me as well. Because I've seen where God has put, you don't ever see the neon signs like when they're happening, right?
That's
That
right.
God leaves
That's
for us, but usually we can look back and go, oh,
Oh.
God was like, there was like a neon sign right there that said, hey, you know, that's what I see throughout my journey is these neon signs that God's used to point me and say, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this right here, this is where you're supposed to be, and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing it. And I still have most of my friends who are still very conservative on this issue have cut me out. I have a few who
Mm-hmm.
will still talk to me here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I'm like, look, guys, like I'm willing to be wrong. I told them this 100 times. I'm okay with being wrong. I was wrong before when I wasn't affirming.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And now that I am affirming, if me being affirming is wrong, then I think God will get a hold of me and show me that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, look, you can use as much scripture as you want on me. You can use all of this stuff. And I said, but I'm going to look at it in the whole context. I'm not going to just read this one little snippet that you send me. And I said, so if you're going to send me a Bible verse, make sure you know what that Bible verse says.
Because I'm coming
And
back at you.
because then I'm going to write you a thesis and a whole dissertation is going to come back to you.
I love,
That's just been part of the
I
journey,
love
but it's
that.
been good. Yeah.
And I can tell you that from my perspective that, I always wanted the burning bush. Just light
Mm,
up my path, please. Just show
hmm.
me. I'll get on it. I promise. I'll get on it. I'll stay on it, but light up my path. But you're right. As I've looked back, all of the things that I did that I always thought was a knee-jerk reaction to
Yeah.
something, and I never really prayed anyway. I mean, it was always me taking care of me because I didn't trust the
Hmm.
God that I didn't understand and the God that I don't know who his parents are, and
Right.
lots of complications. But I did. There were so many clear signs when you're out of it
Yeah.
that you didn't see at the time. And
Correct.
and I think part of that is, also, just trying to trust the people who you thought were wiser than you and that they knew better
Hmm.
and that they taught you a certain way, and you want to be able to trust those people. So friends left and friends have deserted you. What about your immediate family, your parents, I mean, are
Oh
they
yeah.
still in relationship with you?
Yeah, no, like the funny thing is like my wife, she's been a big supporter and she's been part of that story as well. She's always kind of been that little devil's
Mm-hmm.
advocate on my shoulder and like testing me and she's been the one to like ask me like really tough questions and like
Mm-hmm.
make me like answer them. She's like, "No, you have to answer it."
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're going to be a pastor, you have to answer this and you need
Mm-hmm.
to say what you believe. And if you don't know, you need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Good for
And
her.
so yeah, no, she's a tough little cookie. And so no, she's probably been affirming her whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and but no, and no, my parents both are they love what I do and they're accepting of that. My grandparents are as well. At least one set I don't really talk to as much and I don't think they would agree, but that's that. But no, I mean my family, my church community, now at least
Mm-hmm.
have surrounded me. I was doing that church that church on the beach that I'd started with my friends. I was doing that at the same time that I was still working at my current church. That met
Oh,
like really early in the morning. It was geared towards surfers and stuff. And
oh, cool.
we we had like 200 people a Sunday on the beach. It was
Wow.
insane. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow.
And when I got removed from that, it was my church, my church community here that surrounded me and just supported me and was like, no, like you've done the right thing. Like we know this hurts and that it sucks that because you worked
Mm-hmm.
so hard at that and
Mm-hmm.
did a lot for that to make it what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you've been doing the right thing along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I've had a lot of support. Yes, I've lost friends and stuff along the way,
Mm-hmm.
but as my wife so lovingly reminds me, they weren't my friends anyway. If they're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
if our friendship is gonna end over something like that.
Well, and the growth of our own being too. Like when you grow from not being affirming and not
Mhm.
understanding, the whole context of things, and then you move into this other direction, it's like those people are in our lives during the time that we had to have them. And as we
Yeah,
grow apart, it's because we're not needing each other in the same way that we did then. And you've
right.
expanded. You've expanded your vision. You've expanded your mind. I do worry about the people on the beach who need your
Mm.
affirming status because now,
Hmm.
it'll be interesting to see if that holds on
Yeah.
without that kind of energy that you brought to it. Even if you didn't boldly say you were affirming, your
Hmm.
energy was already in that presence. And I'm sure the way you
Hmm.
said certain things, anybody who was in that audience that needed that got
Hmm.
it from you energetically or also
Yeah.
because of the way you phrased things. But I'm I'm wondering now about the church that you're with. So that you are in a
Hmm.
church, the Methodist Church, that is
Yes.
choosing to be affirming.
Yes. Yeah. No, we are
Excellent.
actually, as far as I know, the first United Methodist Church on the eastern side of North Carolina, at least, maybe the whole state, to go ahead and make an affirming statement.
Okay.
Um, where, general conference is not till 2024, where they're looking to actually change the book of discipline. But we had a group of people who were really trying to push us to go ahead and like disaffiliate and all that kind of stuff. And so our staff and our church council and really the majority of our church just said, no, 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 no. We're going to go ahead and just put it out there that we are an affirming congregation. And so it was cool to be kind of part of that process when I was coming
Mm-hmm.
in because of all the other things that I've been through with my other churches and things
Yeah.
like that. They were kind of like trying to like shield me from the drama. And I was like, no, like I'm ready. Like, let's fight. Like, let's go, And it was cool to be a part of that process and actually getting to
Mm-hmm.
to sign my name on the like, yes, we are, because we did this whole thing, like a whole letter signature of our staff and
Uh-huh.
our church council saying that we are committing to be an affirming congregation. And there's been a little bit of fallout from that here and there, but we're growing and doing well. And it's been really cool for me because a majority of our students are queer in some type of way. So for me to kind of stand up and be a voice for them,
Yeah.
and to kind of just be able to say like, yes, like you actually are affirmed and loved here. And I can hang a pride flag in the youth room and it not get written
Nice.
down by somebody, and to let these students know that like, yes, you're loved, you're accepted, you're valued here, and we mean it.
Mm.
Has been a big part of that. And I know the United Methodist Church as a whole is still kind of going through the
Mm-hmm.
growing pains of
Mm-hmm.
of this process.
Mm-hmm.
But where we're kind of more on the back end of that,
Mm-hmm.
it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is beautiful. So one of the things, and you and I have talked about this just a teeny tiny bit when we first started to meet, that at some point I want to have a panel with
Yeah.
you on it and some other folks. And what I'm trying to figure out from not just my perspective, but from all of the community's perspective is how do we then get the people who have been disenfranchised, who've been kicked
Mm,
out of churches, who have been wounded, as I was. And I'm so
yeah.
grateful that I came through those dark nights and I came through all of that self homophobia. And
Mm,
I was, I was my worst enemy in trying to
yeah.
get through this journey. But there are so many people out there who have walked away, who, when they went through the deconstruction, they threw it all out with the
Yeah.
bathwater and they've become
Mm-hmm.
angry and they've
Mm-hmm.
become disenfranchised. And I don't judge them for that. I know
No.
they're wounded and I get
Mm-hmm.
it. And I'm sad. that they still thought they had to make that choice.
Right.
So what would you say to someone who
Oh,
is, and you probably have this conversation multiple times,
yeah.
but what is your go-to thing that you say to
Mm,
folks when they're saying, I don't need church, I don't want church, I'm done with church? How do we
mm,
start to not be the preachy, you got to come
mm.
and do this to be saved? I mean, because that's not helpful.
Yeah.
We can't
Yeah.
draw a line there because I have no clue about
Hmm.
somebody's heart. And I don't think
Right.
we have to be in a church building on a Sunday to
Correct.
receive God's love or to receive
Right.
salvation. However, I do know now that I've come back that
Hmm.
being with a body of believers that
Yes.
I can grow with is helping me grow quicker, and I'm finding the answers that I'm looking for easier because I have people to talk with and grow with. So,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts about how we can start to open those lines up and bring people
Mm.
back into the awareness that they don't have to choose and throw it all out?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question,
Thank you
and
so
that's
much.
one
And we
that
don't have an answer yet, do we?
yes. Well, no, it's one I've been wrestling with for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, and I think I have a somewhat of an answer too.
Okay.
And it's honestly like where my heart is. Like my heart is to reach people who have been burned out, turned
Mm-hmm.
off, kicked out, don't want
Mm-hmm.
anything to do with it anymore. Because I get it. Because I mean, as somebody who has served as a pastor for the past 12 years, there's so many times where I have been burned out and just want to just quit and give it up, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
still here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason that I'm still here and still in it is because I have found that value in community. And like when you find that community, it's so important because life is really hard,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, the religious side of Christianity has played into that and continued to
Mm-hmm.
make life hard and miserable for
Yes.
some people. But
Mm-hmm.
when you actually truly find the freedom of Christ, Galatians 5:1 says, "For the sake of freedom, Christ has set us free." Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's this freedom that we can only get through the gospel. And part of that is having that community. As when I was talking to I preached the other day at our church, and we were talking about wrestling with God, but I took it more of like this idea of like you're actually wrestling with, as in alongside of God. God's like right there with you, right? But I said part of that is like as we're going through these hurts and these traumas and these hardships, like we're all going through it. But genuine church community is coming together, and we're admitting our faults and our failures and our mistakes, but we're also admitting like our hurts and our
Mm-hmm.
hardships, and we're being open and vulnerable with one another because life is difficult, and
Mm-hmm.
we need a community to help us get us through that, because we weren't meant to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's not how we were designed by any
Mm-hmm.
means, was to do this thing alone. Our culture has instead, told us that we need to do it alone, that we need to buck up, bootstrap up and do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's that's not really what we're called to do. That's when we go back and even look in the book of Acts and like how the church was designed.
Mm-hmm.
It was this idea of community and
Mm-hmm.
sharing things together. And when somebody's in need, if you've got a surplus, giving to that, or selling something to so that you can give to that or whatever, and taking care of one another. And so that's my hope,
Mm-hmm.
as the church is obviously as a whole making this really big shift right now. It's almost like we're in some type of reformation. Maybe in like 50 years we'll look back and go, like, right around the 2020s there was this like reformation that took place. um but I see this shift that's taking
Mm-hmm.
place. My generation and the generation below me, like, they're not uninterested in
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. They're not uninterested. um they're uninterested in church, like the institution, but they're not uninterested in church. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what people are hungry for and looking for is that authentic Jesus, that
Mm-hmm.
authentic church. And I think that just starts by having authentic people,
Mm-hmm.
who are vulnerable, who are willing to sit here
Mm-hmm.
and go, hey, I used to believe this, but I was wrong, and now I'm here,
Yep.
or hey, I really, just being able to admit that I'm screwed up. Because I think, I know growing up, I had this like high revere for like our pastors. I thought that they were like these perfect people who were like super connected to God. And
Right.
now I'm like, I'm one of them. And I'm like, you liars.
I'm not perfect. How did that not happen?
No. Yeah, right, right. No, no, no. But part of like what I do is I try to be as authentic and as vulnerable as possible. And I tell my students, I tell my congregation, I tell everybody, like, this is who I am, this is what I'm feeling, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm struggling with. And I open up and talk about that with everybody because I hope that they will take that vulnerability and be able to have it in themselves. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think when we actually begin to do that, that's when we really begin to create that community. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's really what we need to do to attract people back, is
Mm-hmm.
just be authentic, be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, and be willing to be that community that takes that fun little phrase that we like to say, and it's like on every church tagline, that idea of loving God and loving people, but
Mm-hmm.
taking that and actually like really meaning it and really
Mm-hmm.
applying it. I think when
Mm-hmm.
we do those types of things, we'll see people come back.
I love that answer. I love that. And I think it was healing for me to have Father Joe say, Midge, you don't have to give up anything you're doing that works for you right now.
Mm,
Because I wasn't using the word God. I
yeah.
used creator of all that is. The reason I
Ah,
called this podcast Gay with God is because I couldn't say the word God without feeling that disconnect and that judgment.
yeah.
And I couldn't do it. And plus I really couldn't stand the God of the Old Testament because I didn't understand the Old Testament. All I
Right.
saw was a vengeful, very horrible God that just like at a whim, yeah, go ahead, kill them, take them
Yeah.
all, kill it. No. And I didn't have the context that I needed to
Right.
look at you know, who are y'all talking to and why would you say that to them? And
Uh-huh.
there's a reason for all of that. I think being able to connect with a person that says, if this is working for you, don't
Yeah.
stop it. Just keep
Yeah.
leaning in and see what else you can learn.
Right.
And that was very affirming for me to know that he didn't
Mm-hmm.
expect me to just go back and put on that what I call my Jesus facade. I can put it on.
Uh-huh.
And I
Oh
I got
yeah.
I had the he's coming button. I took the Bible to school. I was all Christianized. I was so
You were at see
righteous.
you at the pole, like
Yeah.
all that good stuff, right? Yeah.
but but
Love
then when
that.
I was able to finally, and he also said, you don't have to give up anything you're doing that's working for you. And he said, don't be afraid to keep some of the things you learned, because everything you learned, even though you can't use it all right now and you might redefine it and rethink it, you don't have to throw it out.
Right.
It was there for a purpose. It
Mm-hmm.
served its purpose. So it's not that it's wrong. It may just not be right enough, basically.
Yeah. No.
And so that was affirming, because I didn't like the idea of becoming bitter on the other end.
Right.
I don't want to hate the Bible and I don't want to
Mm.
hate God. How can I
Yeah.
then continue in my faith if I'm doing that? And I think there's a place for both. I can disagree with passages in the Bible that even under scrutiny we can't explain, and
Right.
there's never going to be pretty, but we just have to trust that there's a reason for why that was written for that time, and
Correct.
it was for somebody else but not us,
Right.
and move past it. Get it,
Yeah.
read it, don't be afraid of it because it can't hurt you, but there's more to know and there's more to learn, and it is all grounded in love.
Yes.
That's where it
Yeah.
has to start. And I
That's
like
where
your
it
word, authentic love.
Yes. Yep. No,
Yep.
just being authentic with it. That's it, 100%.
Yep.
Because I think that, we take that word love, and, we've been preaching this in church for years of like,
Mm-hmm.
we can love French fries and we can love our wife, we can love, whatever, and we're always looking to try to define that love. And, I actually experienced somebody who was like, God calls me to love everyone, but I don't have to like everyone. And I'm like, mm,
Mm.
there's the problem. And that's, but no, we're called to love. And we're called to love unconditionally in the same way that God unconditionally loves us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that idea of loving God and loving people is actually really hard,
It
you know,
is. Yeah.
because there are some people out there that are just
Yeah, I'm not good
extremely
at it.
hard to love. Yeah, no, I'm
I'm
not
not
good
good
at it
at
all
it
the time
yet.
either. Yeah, no. And I have to remind myself of that often, especially like when I'm having conversations with people who like borderline hate me for my views.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I sympathize with them often because I was like, well, I was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so or I'll see like a little piece of me in what they're saying,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just be like, I'm giving them grace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go ahead and let them call me whatever name they want, because maybe something that I say will stick.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they won't admit to it right now. Maybe they'll never admit it to me,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe something that I say will stick, and I'll plant that little seed, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
begin to, have a little bit of a deconstruction journey of their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, you never know. Well, and I
Right.
think, you started this by saying that you may not be able to align with the LGBT community, but our paths are very eerily similar
Yeah.
in that you may not be gay, but you
Right.
have been disenfranchised, you've been kicked
Mm.
out of church, you have been maligned, you've been name called.
Yeah.
You may be safe to walk down the road with your wife and holding her hand where we may
Uh-huh.
not be able to. But
Right.
there doesn't mean that you won't get threats
Mm.
because you are aligning with the supposed sinners. So I
Right.
think allies also have a really tough journey. And I said in one of my Pride videos this past time when we had Pride here was that to be an ally, that means that you're going to step up and you're going to maybe say to your church, I believe this way, if you're
Yeah.
safe enough to do so. But that is a really scary thing to do
Right.
because you might lose your church community. You
Right.
might lose a job, and so you do get that pushback in different ways.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And part of like what we're called to do is we're called to stand up against those injustices and
Yeah.
things like that. But that's only something that I feel like I've been hearing recently.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really heard much in church about
Mm-hmm.
this idea of like, hey, no, you should use your voice and you should stand up
Yeah.
against these injustices that are
Mm-hmm.
taking place, because
Yeah.
so often instead we like to kind of sit idly by
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
watch the problem and talk about the problem, but we're not really willing to do anything about the problem and to
Mm-hmm.
use our voice to say something about the problem, or
Mm-hmm.
to go and give a hug,
Mm-hmm.
to that person who is
Mm-hmm.
labeled the problem, and
Yep.
tell them that they're loved and
Yep.
they're valued and
Yep.
it's okay.
So the journey has begun
Yeah.
and we're still walking it.
Yeah.
And
All every day.
I'm so grateful that you came and we finally were able to get this.
Yeah, I know. I know.
You
Our
worked hard
schedules
on
have
it.
been,
You
I
worked
did.
hard on it. You have. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being patient and being able to just keep trying to get on. And I'm thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I look forward to what we can do to collaborate in the future. I think we've got more to do together, and
Sure.
I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me
So,
too.
what would be your final thing that you would like? Your final
My
thought?
benediction.
Your final if you feel like there's something that's left unsaid, or your final thoughts to our community, or to whatever thoughts come to your mind, what would you like to say to close this out?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Okay, great.
No, no,
We'll
I mean,
cut this part out.
right, no, no, no. I talk a lot. So I think to kind of anybody who's listening to this, whether you're somebody who is in the LGBTQ community or you're an ally or whatever, just
Mhm.
know that you are unconditionally loved by God, 100%, no questions about it. And don't let anybody take that away from you. That would
Mhm.
be kind of my biggest thing. And then, for those of us who can, to use our voice, to stand up, step out, and say it.
Beautiful. So thank you so much for coming, Christian.
Yeah,
I,
you're welcome.
I really appreciate it so very much. And guys, I honor Christian and I honor you for always coming and listening and sharing this podcast and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to see more information and links to connect with Christian, go to the Gay with God show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com and check out our Facebook group, Gay with God, where we do a monthly Zoom group entitled My Faith Journey. And if you need support and help with your coming out or faith journey, go to that show page again, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you can see how to connect with me. I'm also doing my Ask Me Anything monthly group. for the book, the big memoir. So you get to come and ask me any questions you want about the memoir or just about me. And the next one that we're going to have for that is going to be August 10th at 7:00. And you can get all of those links at the Gay with God Facebook group. If you are listening to this podcast and are questioning whether you can be gay and be in relationship with the God of your understanding, if you identify as LGBTQIA+, or not even sure if you're gay, God has always been within you, even when you didn't know it. You have always been gay with God. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned to see how you can join the Gay with God community. And as always, you are loved. Listeners, it's not unusual for a person to begin questioning the faith of their past, especially when they've been abused by the church due to their sexual identity, and Christians have been deconstructing for thousands of years, trying to wrestle with their faith and how to best live it out. The problem is it can be a daunting path. So if you were looking to take a journey into your past, get some help from someone who knows what they're doing. The Reverend Father Dr. J. Keith Brown is an affirming Anglican priest with years of formal education, self-study, and practical teaching experience around these very issues. He has put together a deconstruction guide course to help you better understand and wrestle with 7 key topics, including Bible, clobber verses, God, atonement, church, Lord's table, and baptism. In this course, Keith will share definitions, historical views, and then provide you with practical journal questions to help you process these important topics for yourself. As a bonus, you will receive a free group membership where you can ask questions, offer opinions, and make friends with other students in the course. And the best part? The affordable low price for this course. Check it out today. Visit the show page at empoweredmidge.podbean.com and you'll be able to get that link. I want to invite you to become a part of the Gay with God community. How can you do that? Stay connected by messaging me your thoughts and comments in the comment section under the downloads of the show on the Gay with God show page. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen and share so we can increase our community outreach and be a light to those who are struggling to claim their faith. Consider being a sponsor so I can highlight your service in our community. We are all worthy of respect and a relationship with the God of our understanding. I want to thank you in advance for supporting this podcast. Together, we as a community will keep this show visible and our community stronger. Deep gratitude to my friend Tim McClendon of Tim McClendon Music for allowing me to use an excerpt from Interlude 4, a song found on his CD entitled Sundance.